So you'll need a T-square, some pins, a long straight edge ruler, a long very curved ruler, a shorter, more dramatic very curved ruler, a hip curve, a clear bendable plastic ruler, a pencil, a Sharpie, some paper, some cans of soup for surprise dinner later, and of course, cardboard and a t-shirt. First, lay out your t-shirt very flat, making sure the seams are even. Then we're going to measure the lower armhole, the top armhole, and the lower hem, finding the centers. Put pins in at the middle and lay your shirt flat on the edge of the clean paper, and then draw the outline of your t-shirt. Sketch around the top of the shoulder as well. Draw vertical lines from the top of the armhole and the top of the neckline. Draw a horizontal line at the lower armhole. Then we can pin the top of the neck hole. Pin every 1/2 inch precisely through the front neck hole seam. Then pin through the rear neck hole seam. Pin through the armhole seam every 1/2 inch. Sketch along the pinholes that you drew, lightly with a pencil. Draw a straight line for the top shoulder seam. Now draw perpendicular lines at both of the neck hole seams because they have to meet at 90 degrees for at least 1/8 inch in the middle. So the neckline looks correct. Sketch in the back neckline and sketch in the front neckline. Use your triangle to draw a 90 degrees for the lower hem. Sometimes this hem can have a rise or a lower. Use your variform rulers to draw in perfect curves for your necklines. Do your best to make an approximation of the curve that exists. Usually you can find it. Sometimes you may have to flip the very curve. This is like connecting vectors in Illustrator. Do the same for the back neckline. These need to meet at the top and need to be going 90 degrees at the middle. Do the same thing for the sleeve or armhole. You can use different vari-curve rulers to find the form that you need. Connect different curves together that meet on the tangent, meaning they meet at one single point and are smooth and continuous. You can erase any lines that you don't like. Once again, clean up the top of your shoulder. We need to connect the side seam. Generally, this is a straight line on a t-shirt, but sometimes for fitted t-shirts, it can curve just a little bit. Notice at the bottom, it mostly ends at 90 degrees. On a fitted tee, usually the hem comes up a little bit by the sides of the shirt. Each shirt is a little different. Label your pattern pieces starting from the left going to the bottom. Label the neck void. Now we need to measure the length of the back neck void and write it on the inside of the pattern. Measure the front neck void and then also write that measurement on the inside of the pattern. We need to measure the armhole. Notice on all these measurements, I'm starting the ruler approximately 2 centimeters past the end. This makes it easier to bend. Then label the armhole length. Cut out your pattern pieces carefully. Cut out the neck void piece and do not lose it because we need this to make the back pattern piece. You should have 2 pattern pieces now. Now on a new piece of paper, use your triangle to draw an L that is approximately 10 inches long on each side. Place the top seam of your t-shirt in the corner and then sketch out the sleeve. When you lay the sleeve down, make sure that only the sleeve is flat. We don't care about the rest of the t-shirt right now. Then carefully pin every 1/2 inch along the armhole seam. It needs to meet briefly at 90 degrees at the top here. Remove the t-shirt and then sketch out your lines. Use a straight edge for the top seam. And you can use a variform ruler for the end hemmed seam. Now it's time to measure the armhole seam after we draw it with a variform ruler. Remember, you can use any combination of rulers as long as the curve is nice and smooth. That guideline helps us keep it 90 degrees at the end. Now measure and correct for any length discrepancies because the armhole seam has to be exactly the same. Here I'm adding just a little bit more and then redrawing the end seam. Now both seams are the same length. Label your pattern piece and cut it out. Now, if I add up both of the neck measurements, I get 500. But for the rib, I need only 80% of that, which is 425. So now I can measure the rib piece and then draw out a rectangle that is the right size. Here I'm measuring the side of the rib piece. Extend it to the length that you measure on your t-shirt and draw a full rectangle. Label the piece and then cut it out. Now we have 4 pieces for our t-shirt. It's time to make the actual pattern pieces. On a new piece of paper, trace the front pattern piece carefully. You can use your soup can weights to help hold it in place. The center line will now become the grain line on our pattern piece. Flip the pattern piece over and line it up on the center to draw the mirror. Once you're done, true up any lines such as the bottom hem with your straight edge. Then we will add a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the sides, a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the neck, and a 7/8 or 3/4 inch seam allowance on the hem. Don't forget to mark the midpoint of your armholes. We will do the same thing for the back, carefully lining up the neck void piece and then tracing around. Continue tracing the rest of the pattern to make the back pattern piece and mark your armhole midpoint. You can measure from both sides to confirm that you have the correct midpoint. Flip the pattern piece over. Don't forget to flip the neck void piece over as well. Once you're done adding seam allowances, you will have 4 pattern pieces. Notice I've marked the grain line. The sleeve is a simple mirror image flipped on the top shoulder seam. You can save the original pieces so you can make new pattern pieces with different seam allowances anytime you need them. Don't lose these pieces. They were hard earned. Now it's time to sew our t-shirt.